All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. And today we're going to be talking about Spectral from Stoplight. The introductions or the agenda today is we're going to do some introductions. We'll do a quick overview. So for those of you that are new to Spectral, maybe you just heard about it just recently, we are on a very new release of version 4.0. So we do have some updates and everything we'll go through. We're going to do a demonstration, and then we'll do Q&A, which will be going through the whole process, but then we'll also make sure we leave time for questions at the end of this session. So for introductions, my name is Justin Forte. I'm a product growth manager and the moderator today for Spectral. This is obviously brought to you by Stoplight, and we'll go into more details. But as I said, I'll be doing the moderation today. So any questions that come up or anything that happens, I will be working with my other presenter here, which I will introduce now, Phil Sturgeon, who's the chief architect at Stoplight. And we're basically going to kind of collaboratively take this on as questions do come in. So first and foremost, we'll do a quick introduction for Spectral for Stoplight. So Spectral is Stoplight's open source open API linting tool. Now, as we all know, linters have gotten increasingly popular for maintaining consistent code and obviously to prevent future errors before executing that code. But just a quick recap, linters act as a style guideline enforcing predetermined rules during the code creation process. So think of it as kind of like bumpers for a bowling alley, or the ability to basically kind of give engineers the paths to set themselves on the best paths going forward. One of the main benefits behind all of this, obviously, is that in the earlier stages of development, you're building consistent structure in the API spec from the start. What that does for you basically is it gives you foundations to consistently build the right API specs for your teams across organizations. And that consistency means it can be measured, it can be checked, and it helps everybody get some type of uniformity, which we'll talk about in just a second. Now, obviously, when we predetermine rules and everything, the customization behind Spectral is very impressive. However, one of the obviously challenges with unlimited customization, or not limited, but being able to create all of these rule sets is, where do you start? And so Spectral comes with Open API version 2 and version 3 standards by default, and you can customize from there. So if you adhere to Open API version 2 or version 3, pretty much those rule sets are ready to go out of the box. And as you move forward, you can begin to customize from there or decide how much you want to take away or put into it. Now, obviously, one of the big aspects behind Spectral is increasing speed and quality through uniformity, shared knowledge, and guidance. And what that means, basically, when I say increasing speed, I literally mean in two aspects. When you bring on a new engineer, you basically have the ability through Spectral to make them more independent and get up to speed faster as a contributing engineer, because these rule sets, these guidelines help shape kind of the path that they develop and the way they produce their code. And so that way they're given guidance without having somebody sit next to them through the whole time. They don't need more training. They just need to start working basically, and then Spectral helps provide the pathways that they need to go. And obviously through the uniformity side of things, not just new engineers, but engineers across an organization, whether it be directors, senior, junior, et cetera. This kind of path basically provides all of our engineers the ability to code in similar ways. So that way, when we are working collaboratively across teams, we're speaking the same language. So that shared knowledge and guidance part becomes super crucial, basically, especially in larger organizations. In smaller organizations, smaller teams, we just get to move even faster. So what's new with Spectral? So obviously this is our version 4.0. So using the CLI basically with multiple and custom rule sets. We heard actually quite a bit about CLI interface basically and being able to add more into that as well, which Phil will discuss a little bit more. We have new syntax for rule sets, including overriding rules and extending those rule sets. We have more friendly errors and warnings. That was a big request that we've had. And obviously more options for documents and rules. My notes are here. Okay, great. And then next we're going to hand it over to Phil, basically to do a demonstration of Spectral, and I will start answering questions as they come in. All right, Phil,
cool. Thank you very much.
I believe you can take over from now. Let me know if you have any trouble with that.
All right, let's see how smoothly this goes.
Perfect.
All right, I did it. So hello everybody. First off, I'd like to apologize for any ping pong table noise you can hear in the background. As with any office, there's always challenges. So Spectral, this is our cool new website we got set up for it. And stuff like that. Oh yeah, /Spectral, you can check it out. As a visualization of what it can do, we have this demo that we chucked up on the website. And here is the pet store. If you're not familiar with the pet store, it's a common example that the OpenAPI folks like to use. And it has a bunch of pet related endpoints that you can see all sorts of different OpenAPI features being used. So this is a default one, and the default rule set for Spectral has some opinions. So it's technically a valid file, right? But it has some opinions about things that it thinks should be added. And you might disagree with some of these opinions, and you can change the rule sets, and we'll have a look at how you can do that in a minute. One of the first things that Spectral recommends is that you add contact information, right? There's plenty of times where you're working on an API, and at much bigger companies, you might not actually have a clue who is in charge of the API. So it's pretty easy, pretty convenient when the API definition actually tells you. So you can put your name in it, and you can put your email and all sorts of other contact options. There you go. Now you know my email address, don't abuse it. And you can see on the side that the list of things, the list of complaints is now smaller, right? So when that's there, it's like, hey, you should add a contact object. But then we put that in and we have a thing. Now, another thing that's very useful is to have a description. Now, in OpenAPI, this can be quite big. You can have markdown information in there. You can put a lot of information like how to authenticate, and you can put huge, big guides. But an API all about pets, what I like. There you go. That's good enough for now. So you can see that our list of complaints is getting much smaller. Now, you probably don't want to work with this through our website, copying and pasting things around, right? That's a recipe for trouble. So what you can do, we have an NPM package which you can install. I'm playing around with it over here. And so to install NPM, oh, no. Hang on a second. There it is. So you can, we've namespaced it because package ownership is fun. You can install it globally or locally or do whatever you want. We also have binaries and loads of other ways to install this. As a Docker image, you can go nuts. But if you're a fan of working with NPM, this is how you can do it. And then make sure it's all shimmed up properly. So when you try and go to Spectral, then it's in here. I like ASDF, it's cool. So now we can just do Spectral, lint, and I've saved the pet store locally, right? And you might recognize this old pile of things. So if we update it, let's just take this one, get rid of some of those errors because we've already fixed the contact in the other one. So now we're down to these two. Now, I personally might not be particularly interested in writing descriptions for my operations. So what I could do, if I didn't want to mess around too much, is I could do skip rule operation description. And then I'm down even lower. This is useful for when you don't really want to get into extending rule sets, or you add a new item to your rule set, but you don't want to fix it right now. And you have it set up in, maybe have it set up in Circle CI. And then you can also skip multiple things if you want. Ooh, I think somebody just won a set at ping pong. There we go. So now our thing is totally fine. This is pretty useful when you are working locally, like just like this, in your API, you have your API description documents in your code base. You can just keep on running lint every now and then to see if it's any good. You can set it up on a Git hook locally, and you can set it up in Circle CI to make sure that nobody is committing junk. But the main thing is kind of understanding rule sets a little bit. Now, rule sets are over here. So this is the default OpenAPI rule set, and it's baked into Spectral itself. So you don't have to, if you like the idea of using our rule sets and you don't want to start having too many opinions, then you can just use it. And this is how it looks. Some of these look a bit scary, and I don't want to kind of bore anyone with too much code. But for example, this one is called Operation 200 Response. Operations, we have a description here, whether it's recommended or not. That's a more advanced feature. So this one is just saying that everything should have a to something response. There's not much point having an API that cannot possibly succeed. So you probably want to document what happens if things work out. How this is done, given is a JSON path, and we can have a quick look at JSON path in a second. But some of these are a bit tricky because we use a custom function that does a lot of logic. If I was to show you one that's a bit more generic, here, contact properties. So this is the rule that we've just been playing with. And what it does is it looks at info contact. And given that something comes back for that JSON path, it will then look at certain fields inside that object, and it will apply a certain function. There's a lot of functions that we have built in, and they're not currently documented super well. That's something we're working on. And you currently cannot write your own custom functions, which is also something we're working on for version 4.1. It's an upcoming feature, but for now, we're just taking things one step at a time. So here we're applying truthy on name and URL and email, and if any of those are missing, then it will have a moment. So if you want to see how this JSON path stuff works, do a quick little demo. It's JSONpath.com. It's a really cool website. You can just look at any chunk of JSON, then apply a path to it, and then it will show you results on the side here. So what we're doing here is saying, look at the phone numbers, and we're going to take everything from 0 to 1. Jeez, that's loud. I apologize. And what this is doing is just kind of fetching you data, kind of like SQL, right? Gets a bunch of stuff. So what we can do is use this JSON path. Obviously, that doesn't exist. But if we consider that our specs are just JSON or YAML converted, and we look at all this, then this looks there. Ooh, need to add the wrong one. Contact fill. So there you go. Now you can see how that rule works, right? You can kind of piece those things together. There is documentation for how this works over on Spectral. We're going to get it up on the website soon. Website's still being worked on, but we have information here in the docs folder showing how you can create your own rules. So you can do it in YAML format or JSON, whichever one you want. And this one is saying, like, for example, tags should have a description. Tags are really useful, but they're even more useful when you know what they mean. So if you were to have, just tags by itself, no good. But if you add descriptions to tags, then ta-da. So what you can do is you can make your own custom rule set. Again, just a YAML file by default. Spectral in the CLI will look for spectral.yaml. And you can say extend OAS2, which is just a shorthand for hours. This could also be a local file path or a URL to anything publicly available. And you could say, I want all of those existing OpenAPI 2 rules, but also add my own custom rule, which is tags must have a description. After that, you can start to get into more complicated stuff. You can basically say, I want all of the open source too, but you can turn certain rules off. So you disable all of the rules, but then you can actually say, actually, I'd like to enable just this one, right? It's getting a bit complex. Check out this docs for all the information. Or you can say, I would like to extend all of the, I'd like all of them, not just the recommended ones, but literally every single rule that's in there, and then turn off one of them by default. So I'm noticing that we're getting a few questions on Q&A. I'm wondering, Justin, if you'd like to pause for some questions.
Sure. I do have one pricing question, which I can answer. I'm just getting the GitHub link for Al, but Al asked, can we do a quick pricing overview? And the Spectral is actually open source, so I will share the GitHub link for you as well. And obviously, if you're a Stoplight customer, Spectral will be more tightly integrated with a Stoplight as well. But Spectral on its own will be open to use. And then Kyle actually just asked just a minute ago, you touched on this briefly, but you said there's currently no way to define a custom function. Number one, is that planned? And if we wanted to do it right now, what is the best option to fork the repo and add our own functions?
Yeah, so it's absolutely planned. Basically, the Spectral used to be primarily TypeScript, and so you'd work with it via a TypeScript interface, and everything was very TypeScript. You would add rules separately with the add rules function, and you would add functions with an add functions function. And we've wrapped that up to make it a little bit easier using the concept of rule sets. But rule sets don't really have any way to do custom functions yet because it's mostly YAML. It's kind of tricky to do that stuff, and so we want to like think for a moment and kind of come up with a few ideas and get some feedback from the community about how they'd actually like to do that. So something we're working on right now is the ability to load rule sets via the JavaScript API, right? Because right now, if you're working with custom rule sets, you kind of go the CLI route, and if you want to work with rule sets via the TypeScript API, you kind of can. With the TypeScript API, you can still add rules and add functions yourself. So if you would like to do something very, very custom, you can use the TypeScript API directly and add rules and add functions that way. But it's kind of two different approaches. So version 4.1 will remove those differences by letting them both do both, if that makes sense. But yeah, you can follow 366. You just click on subscribe over here and check out progress on that. And I'll be making an issue for the creating custom functions in rule sets soon. So if you're interested in keeping an eye on new functionality coming along, you can watch on the repo and see new stuff as it comes out.
I do have another question from Jorgen. I believe this is kind of a future question, but the built-in linting and Stoplight uses Spectral as well. If so, can I change the rules there?
Yes. All of this will be baked in. A bit of a trend that you might start to see is that the open source tools can move a little bit quicker. And then some of the more hosted solutions kind of higher up the food chain at Stoplight need to take a little bit more time to add those features in, right? Because passing something in via the CLI is a lot easier than creating a nice visual form and then creating a nice UI UX for the entire thing. So anything that you see in these open source tools will most likely make its way into the entire ecosystem later on.
All right, thank you. And then we do have another one. How can I integrate Spectral in the CI/CD pipeline? I would like to create a quality gate in the pipeline that verifies that the API specs of my repo comply with the rule set.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the main use cases for this. We are going to do a little bit more work on this. There's so Vincenzo, one of the developers who puts a lot of work into Spectral here at Stoplight, he has created a GitHub action. And so the easiest way to set it up is to work with the Spectral action. So we're going to put a little bit more work into this to make it easier. But seeing as it's a CLI tool, you can literally just, npm install Stoplight/Spectral and then just run it. You just make it as a step, just like you would run PHP unit or NP, whatever test suite you have. You just treat this like another test suite and you just run it against your specs. This is much easier when you put your specs, your API descriptions in the same repository as your actual code, because then when somebody's working on code, they also are then reminded to actually work on the API descriptions, and Spectral can fail that PR or fail that build if they've committed a bunch of rubbish in their descriptions. So you just treat it like any other test suite and just run Spectral lint against the file. Oh, and there's a bot coming too, a Spectral GitHub bot. All of these things are going to get worked on a little bit to make the integration much easier, so you don't have to write too much of your own kind of custom CI glue.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we're clearing out quite a few of the questions already. So just kind of want to add in or ask you, Phil, real quick, like what are some of the ways that you've used Spectral for yourself, basically to help things out a little bit? Any personal experiences or things that from your past with Spectral and everything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, Spectral is actually based on a previous tool, Specky. It adds a lot more features and functionality than that. And that tool was helpful at a previous job where we kind of discover somebody making a bit of a mistake, or there'd be some sort of bug with the way that they were writing specs, and we just wanted to make sure that nobody else ever did that. There were some things like with our documentation rendering tool, if you were to put a trailing slash on the end of your servers, it would then double slash when it rendered to HTML. So it would look really silly, and other tools would just break. So it was quite nice to be able to just kind of push a change into the rule set and then just have it propagate to everybody that used that rule set. And of course, that is adding a breaking change to somebody that might be using that rule set in their Circle CI, and it might block a few builds, but that's kind of okay, right? Like if you're protecting against bugs and breakages and things like that, just being able to push these changes out to get people making better quality API descriptions over time is pretty convenient. And then of course, seeing as they have the skip rule, if they really can't be bothered to go and add remove the trailing slashes, they can just add the command that says skip this rule and they have their working build again. But yeah, when I worked at a company that had 50 to 60 APIs, trying to run around to every single developer and be like, oh, by the way, you should add a description here. Oh, by the way, you shouldn't put a slash there. Oh, by the way, this should be camel case and not lowercase or whatever. It's all incredibly time consuming. So this just automates that and means you don't have to do that yourself.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So one of the things I do want to kind of reach out to the crowd real quick. We're coming into the 30-minute window. We've gone through quite a bit already. If you do have any other questions, please reach out in the Q&A section. Everything, we'll give everybody a couple more 60 seconds or so, basically, before if we have any other questions to kind of button up as we go. So far, we've talked about pricing, the CI/CD pipeline, custom rule sets, and integration with Stoplight. And we'll just give another minute for anybody to ask any other questions. All right, we're looking pretty good. So Phil, just real quick, anything else you want to say about Spectral to kind of close things out?
Oh yeah, so this was one feature that was popularly requested, and I forgot to mention it at first. When you're extending rule sets, as well as just saying like turn that one on, turn that one off, you can also say, I'd like to change this one to be warn. So if you do true, turns it on, do false, turns it off. You can say error, warn, info, hint. Because no rule set is ever gonna, there's no rule set that we could build here at Stoplight that would just fit everybody perfectly. It wouldn't make sense, but you can definitely kind of tailor these rule sets that we make by saying like, actually that one's not so important. We can make that like a warning, but don't fail on it. I think that's all the cool features we've got for now. There's a lot more coming up though.
All right, we did have a few more questions just come in right at the end. So we'll start with Glavin. Should we create a GitHub issue to start the discussion before submitting a pull request for new features?
Yes, that would be great. We've recently switched from using kind of a private Jira to using GitHub issues itself. So if we are working on something or we're planning on working on something, then that means there should be a GitHub issue already. So please look for existing issues. It's not the end of the world. If you post a duplicate, we'll just let you know it's a duplicate. But yeah, go check out the features that are coming up and see if you like the look of the implementations, or if we don't have any implementations in mind, then please kind of give us your suggestions, because a lot of the time we know we kind of need a feature, but we're not sure exactly how it should be done. And user input there is really useful. So check it out. make an issue. And yeah, I would make an issue before you start working on it, because if you kind of charge ahead with a whole bunch of code, and we have kind of different ideas or feedback on how it could be implemented, then we don't want you wasting your time. So if you kind of make an issue with a few examples of how it might look once implemented, we can all get on the same page, and then the PR can come later. That way, no time's wasted.
Great, thank you. I accidentally answered a question. Let me go find it real quick. Is Spectral going to be closed source someday, or are you planning on having a commercial version of Spectral?
No, it's open source. It's going to be open source. This is like one piece of the ecosystem. We're not trying to monetize every single little tool that we make. We prefer that the people had access to these tools and were able to link their tools. And you know, there's a bunch of other tools coming along, and you can glue them all together yourself. And at some point, you might get bored of gluing them all together and decide to give us a bit of money, and then you realize that all these tools are already glued together for you. No, there's no particular need to monetize Spectral. Use it for whatever you want. Make rule sets, share them, blog about it.
Great, and we do have one more question. So anybody that has any other questions, feel free to jump in. But is there a timeline at this point for version 4.1 and customization options you mentioned it would bring?
Yes, we need to sit down and think up what the exact timeline is for that. We have one or two other launches coming out within the month, I think. So soon. I would say that 4.1, I go out on a limb and say roughly a month, definitely no more than 2. I don't know the exact dates of these things yet.
Great, and then Glavin just asked, can we generate a HTML report?
That is an upcoming feature. Yes, I've just started thinking about that. I really want to have a Spectral report card. So it doesn't just say like, there are problems or it's fine. It will let you know like which things you pass and which things you fail. That's actually something I forgot to mention in the Spectral. So by default, you get this output, which is very similar to ESLint. I think we are heavily influenced by their stylish format, but you can use different formats, right? So if you were to get rid of some of these things, then you can say format equals JSON. And we'd very much like PRs and requests for other formats. It'd be really cool if we could get if we could figure out how to do like JUnit style, right? Or XUnit, sorry. So that you can have like nice, pretty reports, but you can have JSON, and I think that's it. I think it's just stylish at JSON right now. But yeah, for the report and for linting, it would be great if we had a HTML option as well. More formats, please help us.
Perfect. And we do have, and someone asked, anonymous attendee, I love anonymous, examples of how to use Spectral in Jenkins.
Spectral in Jenkins. Yeah, I mean, we haven't posted any, and that's actually probably a fairly good idea for the blog. We could have like, run Spectral on Jenkins, and here's an example in Travis, and here's an example in Circle. Honestly, you're just running a command, right? Because you're just running Spectral lint and then the file. That's it. We don't have the XUnit format output yet, so there's no way to like link it up to get beautiful output. So it is a little bit tricky in Jenkins, because what you're going to get is you're going to get a failed build, and then you're going to have to like scroll through the console output to look to see why. So that's not ideal. But once we have JUnit formats, then we can, or XUnit format, we can shout more loudly about how to like plumb it all together properly in Jenkins.
All right, let's do a quick double check. I think we're looking pretty good on questions right now. Chat's looking pretty clear. All right, every time I say I think we're good, a few more pop in, so I'll give it one more minute. All right. I think we're looking pretty good today. So first, I'd like to thank everybody for joining. This was awesome. Thank you, Phil, very much for your time. If any other questions do come up, I believe everybody received a few emails from me personally for the invites and everything. You can feel free to reply to those emails, and I will do my best to help field those questions or help get the answers for you. If anything else does come up, just go ahead and say hello. We will be posting this as time goes. So we'll send out an update when this recording comes up. So if anybody wants to review anything, feel free and you'll be able to see this demonstration again. Obviously, we would love to see everybody jump on and use Spectral and give us some comments, questions, and everything in the GitHub repo. And hopefully we'll see you there. Thank you, Phil, very much for your time. Really appreciate it. I hope everybody has a wonderful day or evening.
Yeah, cheers, everyone.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody.